Titles are important. They describe the thing you're about to do, they help to sell the product you want to market, they can provide a direction, a reflection, a pretext for thinking about a subject. I call my show Too Many Tapes. It's because I'm Corey and I have too many tapes. Generally, there's kind of a Law & Order synth sting and a glitchy title card after this that I swear is hurting engagement, but that's neither here nor there. Because we're talking about titles. They can make or break a piece of art. And today's tape is broken from the start because it makes you ask all of the wrong questions. It's called Nathaniel the Grublet. Ugh, bad to say. Feels awful coming out of the mouth. Grublet. What is a grublet? Why is Nathaniel one? Why is this the title you chose to draw in an audience? If I were a parent shopping for kids' tapes in the 80s, this would repel me with the force of a giant electromagnet. And yet, this was part of a successful video series based on a fairly popular set of children's Christian albums from the 70s and 80s. Oh yeah, this thing's religious, by the way, not that the title would give you any indication. Or the subject matter, now that I mention it. This thing is a parable wrapped in an allegory, I guess, a piece of storytelling from a bygone time where you could make religious media and still traffic in metaphor. There's not a place for that kind of thinking anymore. Candle, the oddly named band that originally wrote and produced the album this video is based on, wasn't trying to sneak Christian messages into otherwise secular entertainment either. This was an early attempt at a broader transmedia empire. They had a series of successful albums around this fictional place called Agape Land, literally the land called love, which is a sort of fantastical place where everybody is ruled over by a god-adjacent figure called Majesty. Think C.S. Lewis by way of H.R. Pufnstuf. Nathaniel the Grublet sits squarely in the middle of the Agape Land verse, and we're given no real reason or explanation going into this video like we're 18 movies deep into the MCU. Getting into it, I rarely talk about the pre-roll commercials, but there's some real nightmares to be found here. I may have to track down this awful video where the clowns teach you morals.
They'll be clowning around and learning about right motives.
And who do I do them for? Why do I do the things I do?
Who do I do this for?
We open in media res on the darkened city streets of Agape Land. The alleyways filled with shabbily dressed men and cheerful Snow White music. This thing is pretty much wall-to-wall songs, and they're all fundamentally obnoxious, but inarguably well-produced. Candle had that much going for them at least. This first song introduces us to the Grublets. They're jolly folks who sing a happy tune as they essentially clean up trash and take broken things from the town of Agape Land to fix and return to the citizens. The movie's really dark, but also kind of beautifully shot. It has a film-like quality to it, and they didn't really skimp on the sets. This thing is low budget, but the kind of low budget where they seemingly tried their best to create an atmosphere, as opposed to a lot of similar productions which would have just leaned into the inherent staginess of the whole affair. We meet Nathaniel, our young lead Grublet boy, who is portrayed by Chandra Bailey, an adult woman who's a little person. She's fine, there's not a lot to work with here. She's playing our wide-eyed, impressionable lead, and she doesn't so much act as she reacts. Nathaniel doesn't really do things in this movie, things happen to him, so it's hard to judge if it was a performance thing or what. It's a bit odd to not have a kid in this. It's made for kids. Kids like seeing themselves on screen, they respond to it. The only kids in this entire production only show up in the last scene in a wide shot. It's weird. There had to have been a reason for that, but for the life of me I can't figure out why. It's not like the singing parts were especially difficult or the lines were all that complex. Anyway, the process of getting old junk is called grubbling. Well, there we have it. They grubble, therefore grublets. Still hate saying it, although I like saying grublin'. Just sounds like a good time. Do I contradict myself? Very well, I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes. Their whole deal is that they can't exist in the town after sunrise or they'll disappear, so they live in a weird shack outside of town. The grublets make their way through the woods to said shack and examine their honestly pretty mediocre haul. They fix all of this stuff up and then get paid by the townspeople. I'm still not entirely sure what the economics of all of this looks like. The leader of this pack, Tails, is glorious. I love him dearly. He's got a top hat, a bow tie, and a two-tone checkered coat that makes him look like the world's only billionaire ska pervert. Unless, man, I really hope Jeff Bezos doesn't like ska. That would ruin so much for me. The rest of these guys are dressed like first drafts of the various 1980s Doctors Who. In the distance, Tails hears the town bells, and we cut to the townsfolk milling about their day. Then the deeply suspicious mayor shows up.
Oh look, there's the mayor. Wonder what he thinks.
I love waking up to a clean town.
I inherently don't trust him. He has the vibe of a southern conservative politician. There's a shiftiness there. Not too much time to dwell on that, though, as we launch into yet another song that sounds like it's from the same stock music library that Ren and Stimpy pulled from.
Happy is the song you can sing aloud.
I harp on lip sync and choreography a lot, but this is one of the more stilted song and dance numbers I've looked at for the channel. It's also wildly short and doesn't really do anything to either progress the story or establish character, so it's literally filler in a 30-minute movie that already feels like it's been ruthlessly cut to the bone. The mayor talks about how he thinks the Grublets are just great and how Majesty probably loves them, and we hard cut back to the dark forest where the Grublets exit their shack and feel kind of not great about things. Their work is hard, they live in a shack, they don't get paid very well. Tails isn't satisfied with their lot in life. Nathaniel, the cheery little putz, is just happy that they can all work together. Tails thinks there should be an easier way, but we don't really get a chance to see him develop an idea on that thought because instead of showing them grubbling again, they just kind of cut to the next day through a title card. It's really jarring. You can tell they took a longer story and had to strip out everything they could to get this thing to the 30-minute mark. They come back from another night of grubbling, but this time Tails has a sack full of good things that already work, and he plans on selling them back to the townsfolk to make more money. You know, stealing. This upsets Nathaniel, which causes Tails to burst into a tuneful treatise on the finer points of pilfering.
It's not so bad to steal a bit from those who don't have need of it. And if you'll learn to snatch and snitch, before too long we'll all be rich.
Not to critique the material conditions of the characters in a fictional religious parable for children, but I kind of can't blame Tails here. He's seemingly part of a permanent underclass that this society uses for cheap labor, dismissing their poor pay and living conditions under the auspices of nobility. It's obvious they're being exploited here. Why do the townspeople have so much and the Grublets have so little? They're obviously providing a valuable and useful service, so they probably shouldn't be wearing rags and living in a shack in the woods. Tails is offering a good prospect for his family. Instead of foraging all night to then work all day repairing things, he's offering them a way out. Is it the right way? But it's something. I've already failed to absorb the moral lesson in a video designed for 3-year-olds. That can't be a good sign.
All right, that settles it, Nappin. Stealing it is for us.
I want to steal.
And now we're stealing. So much stealing. Stealing penguins, stealing chains, and stealing nice little horsies. Never with any kind of urgency. This is a town of heavy sleepers. Nathaniel tries to steal what appears to be a mason jar full of pixie sticks that are just sitting on a public bench, but a little voice inside of him stops him. He's made for grubbling, not robblin'. He's no hamburglar.
Maybe they don't need it anymore. What would Majesty say? Yeah. You're right.
He solves this moral quandary pretty quickly and then sits around with his cartoon mascot dog for the rest of the night. What is it with early Christian videos and making their actors wear horrifying dog costumes while crawling around on all fours? Maybe it's because the woman who designed the puppets and mascot costumes on this also did the salty videos, but we'll get back to that later. Put a giant pin with googly eyes in that. They wander through the woods, and once again, we're back at the shack. I'm starting to get disoriented. It's been like 3 nights in the span of 5 minutes. Young Mr. Six Flags dancing guy in his second wave ska phase checks out his loot with the rest of the Grublets, their sacks heavy with plunder. But Nathaniel, of course, is being a real stick in the mud. He doesn't like stealing, he prefers grubbling. He's made that point very clear. To make their point even clearer, Tails sings a delightful little oompa song about how he loves the thrill of the risk of crime.
We play a risky game, a risky game, a risky game. We made it, and we made it in record time.
It is, as they say, a bop.
I'm great. I'm great. I'm great. I'm great. You're great. We're great.
You know what? They're right. They are great. This seems like an absolute blast. I'm pretty rigidly in the Grublet worker solidarity camp at this point. Nathaniel is the scab. Boo to the scab. Nathaniel the scablet, more like it. Oh god, I just made a word worse than Grublet. The gang leaves Nathaniel outside to mope and polish some kind of bent plate, and we fade to nighttime yet again. You know how they say the best way to tell a story is in the most compact timeline you can do? Candle never heard that. We're going for Homerian epic here. We're gonna be with Nathaniel till the end of linear time. That being said, these time jumps make something eerily clear. The other Grublets talk about sleeping all day now that they don't have to repair the things they stole at night, so they gather supplies at night and then work all day tinkering. When exactly do they sleep then? Again, I have problems with the working conditions of the Grublets. This is not okay. We need to launch a full-scale investigation into Agape Land. Something is not right here. The stealing has made Tails comically, cartoonishly evil. If that man had a mustache, he'd twirl it. He beckons Nathaniel to join in the evening stealing, but he jets off into the forest, his trusty, enormous dog who inexplicably can talk now, hot on his heels. Also, he sounds borderline litigiously like Rolf.
Oh, cheer up, Nathaniel.
Anyway, now it's finally time for Nathaniel's sad, sad song. It starts languid and glum, but quickly picks up the pace and veers yet again into C-tier Muppet territory. I say that as a compliment. It's almost good, which is so much better than a lot of the ear-grating, no-effort garbage I generally have to hear in productions like these.
So when I get blue, 'cause I don't know what to do, I sing this song. Someday, somehow, things are gonna change, I know.
Basically, he doesn't want to steal. He's made this abundantly clear over the last 10 minutes. The story isn't very good at ramping up those stakes for him. We get stuck in these little rhetorical cul-de-sacs for what feels like an eternity. But once more, it's daylight again, and the rest of the Grublets are getting reckless. They're pushing it closer and closer to sunrise, risking disintegration with their sweet, sweet loot. Tails tries to bully Nathaniel into coming with them on this evening's bigger and better job, but Nathaniel resists. Again, cul-de-sac, round and round and round and round. But suddenly we find the road again, and Tails lays down a tuneful ultimatum. Nathaniel either steals, or he's out of the gang.
Forget the good things you've been taught, and just make sure you don't get caught. And just make sure you don't get caught. Now you go out, and don't come back until your bag is full.
They're really hammering home the not getting caught part. I assume that has no bearing on the story and will have no consequences later. They send Nathaniel and his dog away, and he's just kind of wandering through the woods. We pass an adorable hand-painted sign that says Dire Woods, and then suddenly things get frantic. Lots of handheld camera and foreground obstruction, the trees are pointy and bare, and the eerie synthesizer music starts to swell. And then, suddenly, the most expensive thing in this entire production happens.
The legend says you'll disappear at dawn in Dire Wood.
That's right! They hired Thurl Ravenscroft, the voice of Tony the Tiger, You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch, and Grim Grinning Ghosts to do this creepy track. And it rules, honestly. Thurl was a pro. It adds an air of legitimacy to the whole affair. The whole sequence is pretty dang spooky. It has this genuine feeling of looming dread that feels like a middle ground between the never-ending story and Over the Garden Wall.
Will it be fast? Will it be slow? Will your head fade first? Or your little toe?
I mean, you have to witness the horrific lamentations of a dog as he phases in and out of existence. They're not playing around here. This isn't Tee-hee Kids Show dread. They're trying their best to invoke fear.
To disappear, and there's no way out.
Hold up, the dog's name is Smuggles, not Snuggles, Smuggles. He is a crime dog in exactly the opposite way McGruff is a crime dog. Nathaniel and Smuggles sit on a log in the forest and wish that someone was there to help them, Majesty specifically. What they get is, well, let's just say Smuggles isn't the only crime in this movie.
Follow me, Nathaniel.
Who are you?
Majesty sent me.
So they follow Nightmare Bunny to a second location, a brightly lit stump. The bunny, following in the footsteps of Tails, delivers another stern ultimatum.
The time has come for you to decide. Are you going to listen to your friends and do what's wrong? Or obey your conscience and do what's right?
What do you mean?
Nathaniel, already decided. He hasn't grown or changed at all in the previous 22 minutes. He was already fine. He started out as somebody who doesn't want to steal. He didn't steal anything, and he told his family / friends / roommates that he didn't want to steal either. He never stole. He is not a stealer. Swipe or no swiping. But this is not enough to satisfy the Nightmare Bunny. The Nightmare Bunny demands a price be paid. Summon the Hell Beasts.
The time has come for you. You must decide, what will you do? Your conscience tells you to. The time has come for you. That little voice inside, if you'll obey, will be your guide. Why would you try to hide from that little voice inside?
How do you top the gloomy vibes and atmospheric horror of Thurl Ravenscroft singing about the terror of disintegrating to nothingness? How about the experience of wandering into a Six Flags After Hours only to discover you've inadvertently awakened a surly street gang of dead-eyed plush mascots who carry big band instruments that they don't play so much as they wield with injurious intent? Tonal whiplash is an understatement here. This is probably the most directly didactic of all of the songs, and the fact that the main moral lesson of the show is framed as this wild, pitched-up, furry convention fever dream really undercuts anything they're trying to preach here. This song is all about the tug inside your heart that tells you what the right thing to do is. It's supposed to underline the moral choice that, again, Nathaniel has already made, so in reality it's for the kids listening. There's no dilemma, just lessons, sloppy storytelling. Still getting big Over the Garden Wall vibes though. Greg is in the Cloudland, hanging out with the Max Fleischer cartoons. Fun fact, the woman who designed the rabbit puppet and did a bunch of other stuff in this film, as evidenced by the credits, was the same woman who would go on to create the beautiful and bizarre marionettes for Being John Malkovich, and work on films like James and the Giant Peach, Bicentennial Man, and Monkey Bone. And also, unfortunately, Salty's Salvation Celebration, where she transformed the Salty costume from a weird fabric book with a dude's head sticking out of it into a truly impressive and horrifying anthropomorphic songbook with an animatronic face. I joke around a lot about the puppets and things like these sometimes, but she was a true innovator in the field. She passed away last year, which is a shame. Nathaniel, upon hearing the worst Alvin and the Chipmunks song of all time, reiterates his stance on not stealing and decides he's not going to be afraid anymore. And then the animals take Nathaniel to Majesty. How do I know this? That's it. That's all we get. You don't get to see Majesty. Majesty is unknowable, so you're just gonna have to trust us on this one.
Later.
Good lord, that bear's eyes are haunting. Ow.
Oh, Nathaniel! Your brothers have been caught in the town stealing, and the citizens are very angry.
This was always gonna happen, but what happens next is beyond reason. They've just hogtied these guys in the public square. I am absolutely certain they're about to be killed. What kind of wild, backwards justice system does Agape Land have? Why hasn't Majesty put a stop to this? A random townsperson scoops up Nathaniel from behind for the crime of, well, being a grublet, and ties him up with the rest of the grublets, even though he didn't steal. They're all about to bite the big one when suddenly Nathaniel becomes aggressively top-lit and everyone notices he's been with Majesty. Obviously that means he's a good little boy and shouldn't be hanged or burned at the stake or whatever awful punishment this town has thought up for their exploited permanent underclass who got a little too big for their britches. The mayor, after seeing that one grublet can be good, gross, decides to give the other grublets a second chance on the condition that they do a lot of free labor for the town.
Well, only if they work in the town for a while to prove that they've really changed.
Yeah, we'll work extra hard.
Yeah, we will.
Gross. So gross. This whole resolution is gross.
Honest work for honest pay. That's what we'll do every day. With room, with snitching, snatching too. From now on, grubbin's all we'll do.
This is propaganda, and not just Christian propaganda. This is some hyper-conservative, accept your lot in life and don't ask for more than what you're given nonsense. And honestly, I kind of regret watching it. The message is reinforced by the religious background radiation too. It ends with more title cards about how they never stole again, and how Nathaniel took them to meet Majesty. It's implying a direct correlation between societal order and religious piety. Maybe that's why they can't have any narrative movement in the story, or why Nathaniel never really faces a moral decision. The writers of this thing simply cannot comprehend a compelling argument against their own viewpoint, so they make the quote-unquote villains of the piece so cartoonish to make Nathaniel's choice obvious. But at the end of the day, after they're redeemed and good again, the Grublets are still wearing rags, living in an overpopulated shack in the woods, working tirelessly under dangerous conditions, not really sleeping, and getting paid a pittance to fix up old junk for an unappreciative wealthy ruling class. There's no nobility to that kind of life, it's hard, and they deserve more. Maybe theft isn't the answer, but the answer certainly isn't shut up and take what life gives you, you ungrateful little grub. That's the danger of something as slick as this. It's kind of charming, kind of funky, and the songs are well produced, but with any sort of prodding it falls apart. It's just hard to ignore how deeply regressive the worldview is, and then the whole thing just feels sinister. Depressing ending? Yeah. But at the end of the day, solidarity will always win. Grublets of the world, unite. Thank you all for watching Too Many Tapes. Please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit the bell icon to get updates for when I upload videos. Were you an Agape Land kind of kid? Let me know in the comments. I want to know if the rest of this universe is as bizarre as Nathaniel the Grublet. If you want to help out a small YouTube creator, consider donating $1 or more a month to my Patreon. Every penny I get goes towards making the show look better and finding new tapes or films to cover, so thank you so much to my amazing patron community. I literally could not do it without you. My $50 a month patrons, that's right, we're plural now, get an extra special shout out at the top of the block. They're my own personal majesties, and their names each get to fill the screen while I say nice things about them. Cammy, you're the OG $50 patron, a good egg, and honest to goodness, one of the biggest champions of what I do here, so thank you so much for being a patron. And Chase, my newest $50 patron, if we didn't go down so many YouTube rabbit holes all those years ago, I probably wouldn't be here doing this right now. If you donate $20 or more a month, you're my favorite ska hobo, and you get to have your name in the credits in an enormous font like NATO Kitsch. For $10 or more a month, you're the growing sense that Thurl Ravenscroft should have turned this project down, and your name gets to be pretty big in the credits too. And for $5 a month, you're the nascent but growing Grublet labor movement, and you have my absolute solidarity. Also, you get early access to my videos. Thank you all again for watching, and I'll see you next time on Too Many Tapes. Grublin.